Amara wasn't the kind of girl who needed attention. At 16, she moved through the crowded halls of Lincoln High like a shadow, quiet, steady, and always watching. She'd only been at the school for a couple of months after her family relocated from Detroit, and she hadn't made a single friend yet, not because she was unfriendly, but because she'd learned early on that silence could be armor. Most kids didn't notice her. She wore plain hoodies, kept her braids neat but simple, and always had a sketchbook tucked under her arm. When she wasn't in class, she was usually sitting alone under the big oak tree near the back fence, drawing birds or clouds or sometimes just the way light hit the pavement after rain. Teachers liked her. She turned in every assignment on time, asked thoughtful questions, and never caused trouble. But students? They either forgot she existed or assumed she thought she was too good to talk to them. What nobody knew, what nobody could guess, was that every morning before school, Amara spent an hour in her garage with her grandfather's old training dummy, practicing movements so smooth they looked like dancing. Her grandfather, a retired Marine who'd passed 2 years ago, had started teaching her martial arts when she was just 5 years old. Not to fight, he always said, but to know herself, to understand her body, her breath, her limits, and her strength. Over the years, she'd trained in Wing Chun for close-range defense and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for control and leverage. She'd sparred with grown men at the local dojo, not to win, but to learn. And she'd never once used her training outside the gym, until now. Lunchtime was the worst part of her day. The cafeteria was loud, chaotic, and full of groups that had formed years ago. Amara always sat at the same corner table near the window, eating the food her mom packed. Sometimes jollof rice with fried plantains, sometimes stewed greens with cornbread. It wasn't fancy, but it was home, and that's what made her a target. One Tuesday, a group of boys from the football team walked by her table. Their leader, a tall guy with a smirk that never left his face, stopped mid-step when he saw her container. "Yo, what is that smell?" He called out loud enough for half the room to hear. A few kids laughed. Amara kept her eyes on her food, fork halfway to her mouth. "Looks like dog food," another boy added. She didn't respond. She knew better. Engaging only made it worse. But the leader, let's just call him Tyler, wasn't done. He leaned over her table, his shadow falling across her sketchbook. "You don't talk much, huh? Think you're better than us 'cause you eat weird food and draw all day?" Still silent, Amara closed her sketchbook slowly and placed it in her bag. She could feel eyes on her, phones already lifting. Tyler's smirk twisted into something sharper. "Whatever. You're probably scared to even look at me." And with that, he knocked her tray off the table with a sweep of his arm. The container clattered to the floor, rice and sauce splattering across the tiles. A few kids gasped. Others snickered. Amara didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just stood up, grabbed a napkin from the dispenser, and knelt to clean the mess. Her movements were calm, deliberate, like she was doing chores, not dealing with humiliation. But as she wiped the floor, her eyes flicked up to Tyler's for just a second. Not angry, not scared, just aware, like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. He laughed it off and walked away with his friends, high-fiving like he'd just scored a touchdown. But something in that look, steady, unshaken, stuck with him longer than he expected. After school, Amara walked the 6 blocks home, her backpack heavy with books and her sketchbook. Her little brother was waiting on the porch, bouncing a basketball. "You okay?" he asked right away. He knew her moods better than anyone. "Yeah," she said, ruffling his hair. "Just a long day." Inside, her mom was cooking dinner. The smell of thyme and garlic filled the kitchen. Amara washed her hands and helped chop onions without saying a word. Her mom glanced at her once, then again. "Something happened at school?" Amara paused. She wanted to brush it off, but the image of that tray hitting the floor kept replaying in her head. "Some kids made fun of my lunch," she admitted quietly. "One of them knocked it over." Her mom turned off the stove and faced her. "Did you tell a teacher?" "I told Ms. Ruiz, the counselor. She said she'd talk to them." Her mom nodded, but her eyes were worried. "Be careful, baby. Some people don't like it when you don't react the way they expect." That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the hum of the city outside. Cars, distant music, a dog barking 3 blocks away. She thought about her grandfather. He used to say, "The loudest bullies are the most afraid." She remembered how he'd taught her to breathe through fear, to move with force instead of against it. "Never start a fight," he'd say. But if someone forces your hand, end it fast and walk away clean. She got up and went to the garage. The training dummy stood in the corner, worn from years of use. She tied her hair back, rolled her shoulders, and began. First, the basics of stance, balance, centerline. Then flowing drills, deflect, trap, control. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but her mind grew quieter with every movement. This wasn't about anger. It was about readiness. About knowing that if the world tried to knock her down, she wouldn't just fall, she'd know how to stand back up. The next morning at school, things felt different. Whispers followed her down the hall. A few girls gave her small, sympathetic smiles. Tyler and his crew were louder than usual, laughing too hard, trying to act like nothing happened. But Amara walked with her head up, sketchbook in hand, eyes forward. She didn't want trouble. But she also wasn't going to disappear, and deep down she knew this wasn't over. Tyler wasn't the type to let a moment of silence go unanswered. He needed to prove he was in control. And if he pushed again, well, Amara was ready. Not for revenge, not for show, but for peace. For the right to eat her lunch, draw her birds, and walk home without fear. Because sometimes, the strongest people are the ones who never have to raise their voice or their fist until they absolutely must. And when they do, the world finally listens. The days after the lunchroom incident didn't get better, they got worse. At first, Amara thought maybe it was over. Maybe Tyler had made his point, gotten his laugh, and would move on to someone else. But that's not how bullies work. Once they see a reaction, even silence, they keep pushing, testing to see how far they can go before something breaks. It started small. A crumpled note stuffed into her locker that read, "Go back to Africa." She didn't even flinch. She just balled it up and tossed it in the nearest trash can. Then came the whispers in the hallway. "Weirdo, freak, thinks she's too good for us." Someone drew a crude sketch of her on a bathroom stall with exaggerated lips and wild hair. She saw it during third period and walked away without a word, but her stomach twisted like she'd swallowed glass. At lunch, she stopped eating in the cafeteria. Instead, she'd slip out the side door and sit on the low brick wall behind the gym, where only a few stray students ever wandered. But even there, they found her. One afternoon, as she opened her container of stewed black-eyed peas and rice, two boys from Tyler's group appeared at the edge of the courtyard. They didn't say anything, just stood there, filming her on their phones, smirking like she was some kind of zoo animal. She kept eating, slow and steady, like she hadn't noticed, but her hands trembled just slightly around the fork. She told the school counselor again. Ms. Ruiz listened, nodded, and promised to look into it. But nothing changed. The vice principal pulled her aside once and said, "You know, if you tried to be a little more social, maybe they'd leave you alone." Amara almost laughed, as if being friendly would stop someone who got joy from making others feel small. Her little brother noticed first. "You're walking faster now," he said one evening as they walked home from the bus stop. "Like you're scared." "I'm not scared," she said, but even she heard the tightness in her voice. "You don't have to be," he said, kicking a pebble ahead of them. "You could just, show them." She stopped walking. "Show them what?" "That you're not someone to mess with." She shook her head. "It's not that simple. If I fight back, they'll say I started it. Teachers will believe them, not me. Why?" She didn't answer right away, but they both knew why. She was a black girl, quiet, serious, not smiling on command. In their school, that made her angry or aloof or threatening in ways her white classmates never were. One wrong move and she'd be the problem, not the victim. Still, the pressure built like steam in a kettle. Every snicker in the hallway, every shove by accident, every time someone mimicked her voice, it all piled up. She practiced more in the garage now, sometimes late into the night, not with anger, but with focus. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her head. Control isn't about strength. It's about timing, about knowing when to move and when to hold still. Then came the day everything changed. It was a Thursday. Gray sky, light drizzle, the kind of weather that made the whole school feel heavy. Amara had stayed late to help her chemistry teacher organize lab supplies. By the time she stepped outside, most students were gone. The buses had left. The parking lot was nearly empty. She pulled her hood up and started walking toward the bus stop 3 blocks away, where she'd meet her brother. She was halfway there when she heard footsteps behind her, fast, purposeful. She didn't turn around. She just tightened her grip on her backpack and kept walking. "Hey," A voice called. Think you can just ignore us forever? She knew that voice. Tyler, she kept walking. He jogged up beside her, flanked by two of his friends. They formed a loose half circle, blocking her path. Raindrops clung to Tyler's jacket as he smirked down at her. You're real quiet, huh? Like you got something to say, but you're too scared to say it. Amara stopped. She looked at him. Not with fear, not with hate, just with tired eyes. I don't have anything to say to you. Oh, really? He stepped closer. Because you sure had a lot to draw about us, didn't you? One of his friends held up her sketchbook, her private sketchbook, flipping through pages of birds, cityscapes, even a few portraits of her brother. They must have snatched it from her open locker during gym class. Her chest tightened. That sketchbook was her safe place, her escape, and now they were treating it like a joke. Give it back, she said, voice low but firm. Tyler snatched it from his friend and held it just out of reach. Make me. She didn't lunge. She didn't beg. She just stood there, rain soaking into her sleeves, watching him. And that calm, that stillness seemed to annoy him more than shouting ever could. You think you're so tough, he said, his voice rising. Sitting there like you're better than everyone. Eating your weird food, drawing your stupid pictures, acting like you don't even see us. I see you, she said quietly. I just choose not to waste my time. That did it, his face twisted. Without warning, he swung his hand and slapped her hard across the cheek. The sound cracked through the damp air like a branch snapping. Pain flared hot and sharp across her face. Her head jerked to the side. For a second, everything went quiet. Even the rain seemed to pause, her cheek burned. Her eyes stung, but she didn't cry. She didn't yell. She slowly turned her head back to face him, her breath steady, her posture straight. Tyler looked surprised, like he'd expected her to crumble, to scream, to run. But she just stood there, eyes locked on his, rain dripping from her lashes. You shouldn't have done that, she said. Her voice was so calm it sent a chill through him. He laughed nervously, trying to cover his unease. Or what, you gonna cry? Call your mommy? She didn't answer. She just reached out, not to hit, not to grab, but to take her sketchbook back. He hesitated, then shoved it into her chest. Whatever, freak. They walked off, laughing too loud, trying to act like they'd won. But as they turned the corner, one of them glanced back. Amara was still standing in the same spot, sketchbook held close, rain washing over her like a baptism. She didn't go straight home. She walked to the bus stop, met her brother, and held his hand the whole way back, tighter than usual. When they got home, she went straight to the bathroom and stared at her reflection. A red mark bloomed across her cheekbone, already starting to swell. She touched it gently, wincing. Her mom saw it at dinner. Amara. Her voice broke. I'm okay, Amara said quickly. It's just a slap. Just a slap. Her mom's eyes filled with tears. Baby, that's assault. That's not just anything. I know, Amara whispered. But if I make a big deal, they'll say I provoked him, that I was being rude. You know how it goes. Her mom sat down across from her, hands shaking. No, not this time. This stops now. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the sting of that slap, heard the laughter, saw the way her sketchbook had been handled like trash. But beneath the hurt, something else stirred, something quiet and solid. Not rage, not revenge, but resolve. She got up and went to the garage again. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with moisture. She lit the single bulb overhead and faced the dummy. She didn't punch it. She didn't kick. She just stood in her stance, breathing, centering herself. If someone attacks you, her grandfather used to say, your first job is to protect yourself. Your second is to stop them from hurting anyone else. Never fight to humiliate. Fight to end it. She practiced defensive moves, blocks that redirected force, grips that controlled without breaking, steps that created space. She wasn't training to hurt Tyler. She was training so that if he ever came at her again, she wouldn't be a victim. She'd be in control. The next morning, she walked into school with her head high. The red mark on her cheek had faded to a soft purple, but she didn't hide it. She wore it like a badge, not of shame, but of survival. Rumors were already spreading. Someone had seen the slap. Someone else had recorded it on their phone. By third period, half the school was whispering. Some kids looked at her with pity, others with respect. A few girls slipped her notes. I'm sorry that happened. He's a jerk. You're brave. Tyler acted like nothing happened. He laughed louder in the hallways, shoved lockers harder, tried to act like he was still on top. But his eyes kept darting toward her. And every time they did, she met his gaze, calm, steady, unafraid. She knew he wasn't done. Bullies don't back down when they feel challenged. They double down. And sooner or later he'd try again. But this time Amara wouldn't be waiting to be hit. She'd be ready, not to fight but to protect. Not to win but to walk away with her dignity intact. Because the truth was she'd already won. She hadn't broken. She hadn't disappeared. She was still here, quiet, strong and unshaken. And that, more than any punch or kick, was what scared him the most. The slap didn't just leave a mark on Amara's face, it left one on the whole school. At first no one talked about it out loud. But in the hallways, in group chats, in hushed conversations by lockers, the story spread fast. Someone had filmed it, not the whole thing. Just the moment Tyler's hand cracked across her cheek and the way Amara stood thereafter, silent and still like a tree in a storm. The video wasn't posted online, not yet, but it was being passed around on phones in pockets and under desks. And with every share, the truth got harder to ignore. Most kids didn't say anything to Amara directly, but things changed in small ways. The girl who used to roll her eyes when Amara sat alone at lunch now nodded at her in the hallway. A boy from her history class slipped a granola bar into her open backpack when she wasn't looking. Even the lunch lady gave her an extra spoonful of greens one day and said, "You keep your head up, sweetheart." But not everyone was kind. Some kids still laughed when Tyler walked by. Others muttered that Amara must have said something to deserve it. One teacher even pulled her aside and said, "Maybe try not to provoke people so much." Amara just nodded and walked away. But inside, it stung worse than the slap ever did. Because it wasn't about what she said or did, it was about who she was. Quiet, different, unwilling to perform for their comfort. Still, she didn't back down. She kept showing up, kept sitting under the oak tree at lunch, kept drawing in her sketchbook, though now she kept it zipped inside her bag unless she was alone. And every morning before school she trained, not with anger but with purpose. Her movements were smooth, precise, like water finding its path. She practiced how to step out of grabs, how to control an arm without breaking it, how to create space when someone got too close. She wasn't preparing for a fight. She was preparing for peace, on her own terms. One afternoon as she walked past the gym after class, she overheard two girls talking near the water fountain. "Did you see that video?" One whispered. "Yeah, I can't believe he did that in broad daylight. I heard he's been doing stuff like that for months. Just, no one ever stood up to him." Amara kept walking, but her heart beat a little faster. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She just wanted to be left alone. But maybe, just maybe, her silence had done more than she realized. That same week, a teacher noticed something no one else had. During a fire drill, Amara stood near the back of the line, arms crossed, eyes scanning the crowd like she always did. The science teacher, Mr. Ellis, a quiet man in his 50s who rarely spoke unless called on, saw the fading bruise on her cheek. He'd seen Tyler shove a freshman into a locker the week before. He'd heard the whispers. And now, looking at Amara's guarded posture, the way she flinched slightly when someone walked too close behind her, he put it all together. The next day, he asked to speak with her after class. Not in front of anyone, just the two of them standing by the lab tables. "You okay?" he asked simply. Amara hesitated. She'd learned not to trust adults too easily. But there was something in his voice, no pity, no judgment, just concern. "I'm fine," she said. He nodded. "I believe you, but I also believe things haven't been fine for a while." She looked down at her shoes. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said gently, "but if you ever want to, my door's open. And if you're not ready to talk, I can still make sure someone listens." That night, Amara sat at the kitchen table with her mom and brother. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the soft scratching of her pencil as she drew. Her mom stirred a pot of soup on the stove, glancing at her every few minutes. Finally, Amara spoke. Mr. Ellis saw the bruise. Her mom turned off the burner. "And? He didn't push?" "But he said he'd help if I wanted." Her little brother looked up from his homework. "Do it. Why?" she asked. "Because," he said like it was obvious. "You shouldn't have to be scared to walk to the bus stop." Amara swallowed. She thought about all the times she'd stayed quiet to avoid making things worse. All the times she'd told herself it wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal. And maybe staying silent wasn't protecting her. It was protecting them. The next morning, she went to Mr. Ellis before first period. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just told him everything. About the notes, the stolen sketchbook, the shoves in the hallway, the slap. She showed him the video on her phone, the one a classmate had secretly sent her. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "Thank you for trusting me." Then he walked straight to the principal's office. This time, the school couldn't ignore it. By lunch, Tyler was called to the office. His friends watched him go, confused. He came back an hour later, face red, jaw clenched. He didn't look at Amara. He didn't joke around. He just sat in the back of class, arms crossed, staring at the wall like the whole world had turned against him. Rumors flew. Some said he was suspended. Others said he had to meet with the counselor every day for a month. No one knew for sure, but everyone knew something had shifted. Meanwhile, Amara started noticing something else. Other kids were coming forward. A freshman girl admitted Tyler had tripped her down the stairs last semester. A quiet boy from the art club said Tyler had stolen his headphones and laughed when he cried. Even a teacher recalled seeing him shove a student into a locker and doing nothing because boys will be boys. It wasn't just about Amara anymore. It was about all of them, but Tyler wasn't taking it lying down. On social media, his friends started posting vague things like some people need to stop playing victim. And not everything is racism or bullying. Sometimes you just need to toughen up. A few comments popped up under school. Posts calling Amara dramatic and attention-seeking. She saw them. She read them. And for a moment, doubt crept in. Was I wrong to speak up? Did I make it worse? But then her brother showed her something. He'd been scrolling through the school's unofficial group chat and found a thread titled, "Tyler's Reign." Dozens of students, mostly girls, mostly students of color, had posted their own stories. Not angry rants, just facts, dates, places, what he said, what he did. One girl wrote, "He called me a ghetto rat because I wore my hair in twists. I was 12. Another, "He told me my lunch smelled like garbage. It was my grandma's gumbo." And one, simple and powerful, "I stayed quiet for 2 years. Thank you for speaking up." Amara cried that night, not from sadness but from relief. She wasn't alone. She never had been. Still, she knew Tyler wasn't done. His pride was wounded. His image was cracking. And guys like him, they don't go quietly. They double down. They look for a chance to prove they're still in control. She saw it in his eyes the next time they passed in the hall. He didn't say anything, but his stare was sharp like a warning. "You think you won?" it seemed to say. "Wait and see." Amara didn't flinch. She just kept walking, her steps steady, her breath even. She'd trained for this, not just her body but her mind. She knew fear. She respected it. But she wouldn't let it steer her. That evening, she went to the community center where her grandfather used to teach self-defense classes. The old instructor, a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and hands like steel, greeted her with a hug. "Heard what happened," she said. "You held your ground." "I didn't do anything," Amara said. "You didn't have to," the woman replied. "Sometimes just standing still is the bravest thing you can do." They trained for an hour, light drills, breathing exercises, situational awareness. "If he comes at you again," the instructor said, "don't think about winning. Think about safety. Yours, his, everyone's. Your job isn't to hurt him. It's to stop the cycle." Amara nodded. That was exactly what her grandfather would have said. Back at home, she sat on the porch with her brother as the sun set. Fireflies blinked in the yard. The air smelled like rain and jasmine. "You scared?" he asked. "A little," she admitted. "But you're not gonna run?" "No," she said. "Because if I do, nothing changes. Not for me. Not for them." She nodded toward the street where a group of younger kids walked home from the bus stop, laughing, loud, free. He leaned his head on her shoulder. "I got your back," she smiled. "I know." The next day at school, tension hung thick in the air. Tyler avoided the main halls. His friends walked with their heads down. Teachers watched the corridors more closely. And Amara, she walked like she always did, calm, focused, present. She didn't know what would happen next. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't the same girl who let her lunch get knocked over without a word. She'd spoken up. She'd stood tall. And whether Tyler liked it or not, the world had started listening. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do isn't to throw a punch, but to refuse to be erased. And Amara, she was done disappearing. The tension at school had been building like a storm waiting to break. Everyone could feel it. The teachers, the students, even the janitor who usually kept to himself. Tyler hadn't said a word to Amara since the slap, but his silence wasn't peaceful. It was coiled like a spring pulled too tight. He watched her in the hallways. He sat stiffly in class. And when he laughed with his friends now, it sounded forced, like he was trying to convince himself he still had control. Amara knew it was coming. Not because she wanted trouble, but because she understood people like him. When someone's used to being on top and suddenly the ground shifts beneath them, they don't step back. They push harder. And Tyler was about to push. It happened on a Friday afternoon just after the final bell. Most students had already rushed out eager for the weekend. Amara stayed behind to finish a lab report in the science room. The halls were quiet, lit by the golden light of late afternoon sun slanting through the tall windows. She packed her bag slowly, zipping her sketchbook inside, double-checking that her pencil case was closed. She wasn't rushing. She never rushed. Rushing meant losing focus, and focus was her armor. As she stepped into the hallway, she saw him. Tyler stood near the gym doors alone, arms crossed, shoulders hunched like he'd been waiting. His eyes locked onto hers the second she appeared. There was no smirk this time, no crowd. Just him, her, and the echo of her footsteps on the empty tile. She could have turned around, could have gone out the back entrance, called her brother to meet her early, pretended she forgot something in class. But something in her gut said, this ends now, not with shouting, not with violence, but with truth. She kept walking. When she was about 10 feet away, he stepped into the middle of the hall, blocking her path. "You think you're real tough now, huh?" he said, voice low but sharp. "Running to teachers, crying about a little slap like you're some victim?" Amara stopped. She didn't cross her arms, didn't raise her voice. She just looked at him, really looked, and said, "I didn't cry, and I didn't run. I told the truth. That's not weakness. That's courage," he scoffed, but his jaw tightened. "You made me look like a monster." "No," she said calmly. "You did that yourself. I just stopped pretending you weren't." That hit him harder than she expected. His face flushed red. He took a step forward, close enough that she could smell the cheap cologne he wore. "You don't know me," he snapped. "You don't know what I've been through." "Maybe not," she said, "but I know what you did to me, and to others. And that's enough." He raised his hand, not to slap this time, but to shove her, hard like he had with so many others before. "Shut up," he growled. But Amara was ready. The moment his fingers brushed her shoulder, she moved, not away but into his motion, just like her grandfather taught her. She turned her body slightly, guiding his push past her instead of against her. His momentum carried him forward, off balance. Before he could recover, her left hand caught his wrist, her right arm sliding under his elbow. In one smooth motion, she pivoted and lowered her center of gravity, using his own force to guide him gently, but firmly, down to the floor. He landed on his side, more surprised than hurt, his eyes wide with shock. She didn't pin him hard. She didn't twist his arm or press her knee into his back. She just held his wrist in a controlled grip, enough to keep him from jumping up, not enough to cause pain. "Let me go," he yelled, struggling. "No," she said, voice steady. "Not until you understand." He stopped thrashing, breathing hard, staring up at her like he'd never seen her before. "What are you?" "I didn't come here to fight you," she said. "I came here to walk home, but you keep choosing to stand in my way. You hit me. You stole my things. You made me feel small. And for what? Because I'm quiet? Because I eat food that smells like home? Because I don't laugh when you want me to?" He didn't answer. His chest rose and fell fast. "You think power is about making people afraid?" she went on. "But real power is knowing when not to use it. I could have hurt you just now, but I didn't. Because I'm not like you." A voice cut through the silence. "Whoa, what's going on?" They both turned. A group of students had just rounded the corner. 3 girls from the art club, 2 boys from the robotics team, and a teacher's aide heading to the supply closet. Phones were already out. One girl stepped forward. "Are you okay, Amara?" "I'm fine," she said. Then to Tyler, still holding his wrist lightly, "Are you okay?" He blinked. No one had ever asked him that in the middle of a confrontation. He nodded slowly. She released his wrist. He sat up, rubbing his arm, not looking at her. The crowd watched, unsure what to do. No one cheered. No one laughed. They just stood there, witnessing something real. Then one of the girls said, "We saw everything. He came at you first," another added. "We've got it on video." Tyler's head snapped up. "You're gonna post that?" "No," the girl said firmly. "But we're keeping it, in case you try this again." Amara stood, brushed off her jeans, and shouldered her backpack. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She just looked at Tyler one last time and said, "You don't have to be this person. You can choose to be better." Then she walked past the group, down the hall, and out the front doors into the warm afternoon light. Behind her, no one followed. No one shouted. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. By Monday, the whole school knew what happened. But this time the story wasn't twisted. The video, short, clear, showing Tyler lunging first, Amara defending herself without striking, spread fast. Not as gossip, but as proof. Proof that she never wanted to fight. Proof that she only acted when she had no choice. Proof that strength isn't about throwing punches, it's about restraint. Tyler didn't show up to school that Monday. Rumor was he was suspended for the rest of the semester. His parents were furious, of course. They showed up at the principal's office demanding Amara be punished for assault. But the video, the witness statements, the history of complaints, all of it painted a clear picture. The school stood firm. For once, the system worked. But Amara didn't feel victorious. She felt tired and sad, because she knew Tyler wasn't evil. He was lost, angry, probably hurting in ways no one saw. And instead of helping him, everyone, teachers, coaches, even his own friends, had let him believe that power meant control, that respect meant fear. That week, something unexpected happened. A group of students, mostly girls, mostly from backgrounds like hers, started gathering near the oak tree at lunch. Not to talk about Tyler, not to gossip, but to sit with Amara, to share their stories, to draw. To just be. One girl brought homemade empanadas. Another brought a playlist of old soul music on a Bluetooth speaker. Someone else started a notebook where anyone could write anonymous messages of support. It wasn't a club. It wasn't official. It was just community. Amara didn't lead it. She just showed up. And in showing up, she gave others permission to do the same. At home, her little brother grinned when she walked in. "You're famous," he said. "I'm not famous," she laughed. "Kinda are," he insisted. "Kids at my school are talking about you. They say you're like a real-life superhero." She ruffled his hair. "I'm just a girl who got tired of being quiet." But deep down she knew this was bigger than her. What happened in that hallway wasn't just about one slap or one shove. It was about every kid who'd ever been made to feel small for being different, for speaking softly, for eating food that smelled like their grandmother's kitchen, for existing in a world that only celebrates loudness and conformity. And maybe, just maybe, her quiet strength had given others the courage to find their own. She still trained every morning, still drew in her sketchbook, still walked with her head up. But now, when she passed someone in the hall, they didn't look away. They smiled, said hi, held the door, not because she'd won, but because she'd shown them that dignity doesn't need volume. That peace doesn't mean passivity, that you can stand your ground without ever raising your voice or your fist unless you absolutely must, and when you do it cleanly, calmly, with control, because the goal isn't to destroy your enemy, it's to protect your peace. And Amara, she'd finally found hers. The days after the hallway incident settled like dust after a storm, quiet, but changed. The air at school felt lighter, like something heavy had finally been lifted. Tyler didn't come back for the rest of the semester. Word was he was doing online classes and mandatory counseling. His friends drifted apart, some even apologizing quietly to kids they'd bullied in the past, as if waking up from a long, mean dream. No one celebrated his absence, but no one missed him either. Amara didn't feel like a hero. She didn't want to. Heroes get statues and speeches. She just wanted to eat her lunch in peace, finish her drawings, and walk home without looking over her shoulder. But life had other plans. It started small. A girl from the freshman class left a note in Amara's locker. "Thank you for showing us we don't have to be scared." Then, another student asked if she'd help start a peer support group, just a safe space where kids could talk. about what was really going on in their lives, without judgment. At first, Amara hesitated. She wasn't a counselor. She wasn't even that talkative. But then she remembered how alone she'd felt, how silence had almost swallowed her whole. If she could help even one person feel seen, wasn't that worth stepping out of her comfort zone? So she said yes. With the school counselor's help, they turned an unused classroom into a meeting space. They called it the Circle. No fancy name, just a place where chairs were arranged in a ring and everyone's voice mattered. The first meeting had only 5 people. By the third week, there were 20. Kids talked about anxiety, family stress, feeling invisible, being mocked for their clothes, their accent, their skin, their lunch. Amara didn't lead the conversations. She just listened. And when someone asked how she stayed calm when everything felt like it was falling apart, she'd say, "I breathe. I remember I'm not alone. And I remind myself that my worth isn't decided by people who don't know me." Meanwhile, the local community center reached out. They'd heard what happened, not just the slap, but how Amara handled it, and they wanted her to help teach a self-defense workshop for teens. Not the flashy movie-style fighting. Real practical stuff. How to spot danger, how to set boundaries, how to use your voice before your hands, and how to protect yourself if you absolutely have to. She almost said no. She didn't want to be seen as the girl who fights, but her grandfather's voice came back to her. Knowledge shared is power multiplied. So she agreed. Every Saturday morning, she stood in the center's gym demonstrating simple moves, how to break a wrist grab, how to create space, how to fall safely. But more than the physical skills, she taught awareness. Your eyes are your first defense, she'd say. Your voice is your second. Your hands are your last. Parents watched from the sidelines, some with tears in their eyes. One mother hugged her afterward and whispered, "My daughter used to walk home with her head down. Now she walks like she owns the street." Amara smiled. That was enough. At school, things kept shifting. The principal announced a new anti-bullying policy. Not just posters on the wall, but real consequences, real training for staff, and student-led workshops. Amara was asked to help design the program. She didn't do it alone. She brought in kids from the Circle, kids who'd been bullied, kids who'd done the bullying, kids who just wanted to make things better. Together they created role plays, discussion guides, even a kindness challenge where students earned points for small acts of respect. Holding a door, saying good morning, sitting with someone who's alone. It wasn't perfect. There were still whispers. Still kids who rolled their eyes and called it woke nonsense. But more and more the culture was changing. Lunchrooms felt less like battle zones and more like places where people actually ate together. Hallways weren't just paths to class, they were spaces where "hey" and "you good?" became normal greetings. Amara's little brother started standing taller too. He told her one night, "Some kid tried to take my lunch money last week." I looked him in the eye and said, "Not today." He walked away. Amara hugged him tight. "You didn't need to fight him," she said. "You just needed to mean it." "That's what you taught me," he replied. She hadn't realized she was teaching him. But maybe that's how real change happens, not in grand speeches, but in quiet moments between siblings, friends, strangers who choose kindness over cruelty. One afternoon, as she sat under the oak tree sketching the way sunlight filtered through the leaves, a new student approached. She looked nervous, clutching a worn backpack, eyes darting like she expected someone to yell at her. Amara patted the spot beside her. "You can sit," she said gently. The girl hesitated, then sat down. "I just moved here," she whispered. "Everyone seems loud," Amara smiled. "Yeah, but you don't have to be." She tore a blank page from her sketchbook and handed it over with a pencil. "Draw something. Doesn't have to be good. Just yours." The girl blinked, then started sketching a bird, wings spread, flying toward the sun. They sat in silence for a while, two quiet souls sharing space without needing to fill it with noise. And in that moment, Amara knew this was the victory. Not the takedown in the hallway, not the video going viral, but this, creating a world where someone like her could just be without fear. At home, her mom started cooking extra portions on Sundays. "For the kids who stay late at the Circle," she said. "Everyone deserves a warm meal and a soft place to land." Amara nodded, stirring the pot of red beans and rice. "Granddad would have liked this," she said. "He would have been proud of you," her mom replied, voice thick with emotion. That night, Amara wrote in her journal, the same one she'd kept since she was 10. She didn't write about fighting or fear. She wrote, "I used to think strength was about never showing pain, but now I know it's about letting yourself feel it and still choosing to."